Williamson had 23 points last night in a win over the Clippers. But it was former NBA great Charles Oakley's comments on Zion making headlines this morning. That's what we're talking about. Because Oakley said this. He said, quote, "I think Julius Randle's a better version of Zion to me because he can do more. Zion's just hype in the league, but in the playoffs, he'll be just like the Greek freak. They'll have the wall for you. First of all, Zion Williamson got to get to the playoffs." So, Antonio, you call Pelicans games. You know Zion well. You see him up and close. What do you make of the comparison?
I don't understand the comparison. I don't. You're talking about two players that only compare in size, the fact that they both were first-year All-Stars this year and are both left-handed. That's it. When you look at their skill sets and what they do, the way they play the game, the way that they approach the game, there are two completely different basketball players. And this is always a tough discussion to have because it's almost like if I'm crediting Zion, then I'm discrediting Julius Randle. Or if I'm crediting Julius Randle, then I'm discrediting Zion. These two are both fantastic players, but you're comparing a guy who has been in this league for a lengthy amount of time, who has played over 400 games, to a guy that's only played 80 games. He played his 80th game last night. So, yeah, I get the whole, I don't grasp the concept of the comparison, though. And we were talking about that prior, too. I don't see where this is coming from outside of the fact that so much is being made about Zion because we were just in Madison Square Garden about a week ago. That's the only reason. If Julius Randle is playing in Orlando or if Julius Randle is playing in Cleveland, we are not having this discussion right now.
That's right. Antonio, I think you were 100% right, but I think Charles Oakley was about 50% right. And I think the 50% part that he was right about was that you'll be able to stop Zion if he makes it to the playoffs. And what was most interesting to me, Nick, was you saying how dynamic of a scorer Julius Randle is. If we can show the full screen here. And this stat shocked me, that Zion has only made 16 points, 16 shots outside of the paint. Nick, I was shocked by that. So I think that Oakley is saying, look, these guys are both good. One is probably underhyped. One may be overhyped. And this is Charles Oakley. One guy is driving his team to the playoffs. One guy isn't. And when you get to the playoffs, he's going to be treated like Giannis and put a wall in front of him, like take away those buckets. And he's going to be less effective a scorer versus Julius Randle, who can hit from mid-range and hit from three. So I think Charles Oakley was halfway right, Nick.
Okay, he was 0% of the way right, and I don't even want to talk about Zion here. Zion is having one of the most efficient seasons in the history of the league. The guy was a superstar from the moment we saw him in high school in South Carolina. He was a superstar at Duke. He was the best player on a great team there. He's been awesome every step of his career. I need to now be the bad guy on the Knicks and Julius Randle. And you might want to take Antonio off the screen because I don't want him to catch shrapnel when this goes on the internet and people think he's co-signing it. But folks, stop pretending that Julius Randle is anything other than what he is, which is a nice story and a good player. Julius Randle is an MVP candidate. Well, I don't know. If we're going to have 12 MVP candidates, I suppose, because off the top of my head, who's ahead of him? Well, Jokic is, Embiid is, I would argue CP3 is, Steph definitely is, Kawhi is, Giannis is, Luka is, Dame is, Harden's injured, he's ahead of him, LeBron's injured, he's ahead of him. Okay, that's 10. You want to go after 10 and include Julius Randle, who I get it, Knicks fans, you're excited. You have a legitimate chance this year to win your second playoff series this millennia. But you are currently sitting with the same record as the Hawks. And what is happening right now in basketball media with Julius Randle is the player version of what happened 6 weeks ago with the Jazz, where everyone was like, I'm going to prove to the smart basketball folks that I'm not a casual. I'm going to explain how I love the way the ball pops with the Jazz extra pass. And now that is the Julius Randle discussion. Now it's, oh my God, Julius Randle. He's up to 6 assists a game. Did you know? Yeah, we know. He's also 20th in the league in points and 38th in PER and the best player on a mediocre team. Stop it. Everybody stop acting like they think Julius Randle can be the best or even the second best player on a contender. No one believes that. They just act like that. And Antonio, they compare him to Zion, who will win multiple MVPs. And it's like, oh, I'd rather have Julius Randle. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. I can't deal with it anymore. I can't deal with the Knicks. I can't. I'm sorry. My rant's over, but it's enough. Enough.
Let me kick back on you. Can I fire back really fast? Okay, first, I disagree with you about Julius Randle in the MVP discussion. I do disagree with you about that. We have to give him credit for what he's done. And again, I don't like having these debates because what happens is we are talking great about one, which means we're discrediting the other. But I will say this about Zion, and I have said this about day one. I can eliminate Julius Randle from the conversation. Last year, when I got here, from day one, I watched every single practice from training camp on until Zion got hurt, and then after. And I said at that time, I remember going on the radio with you, Nick, and saying, this dude is one of one in the history of the sport. I have never seen anything like it. Rick Carlisle, what Rick Carlisle said about him, he said he's a Shaq force of nature with a point guard skill set. Let that marinate for a minute. A Shaq force of nature with a point guard skill set. I've never seen anything like it. But what happens is we forget the fact that Zion's he played his 80th game last night. We aren't talking about a guy that is a finished product, a guy that's 6 or 7 years in. We are talking about a guy that's played 80 games in 3 different stints.
And the Giannis stuff is unfair because Giannis is so much older, has so much more experience, and the same thing has happened to him in the playoffs multiple times. But, hey, listen, because I know NBA Twitter is going to kill me, Brandon. Folks, I watch the league.
No, they're not.
I watch the league enough that I watched Julius Randle, forget as a Laker, as a Pelican. And guess what? Here's how his game has changed. He takes more threes now, and he's a better three-point shooter. He's actually slightly less efficient around the rim than he was as a Pelican. And he plays 8 more minutes a game, so his numbers have jumped. That's it. This idea that the Knicks are now some pseudo-fringe contender, no one actually believes it, Brandon. It's make-believe.
Right. Hey, Nick, Twitter isn't going to kill you. They know it. They see it. They understand it. What they will say, though, is why'd you get worked up off of what Charles Oakley said? Uncle Charles is on the golf course with MJ, the GOAT, puffing on stogies. He's not watching basketball. We know this. Zion is in year 2, Jenna, and this guy, Julius Randle, took him 7 years to get to a point where he's averaging 23 points. Zion did that last year. Zion this year is averaging 27 points. So it's not even a discussion. And, Nick, you got worked up off of Uncle Charles's comments from the golf course. Come on, man.
You might be right.
Let us let all that marinate.